digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session coming at you live from GTC here in San Francisco. We have a lovely table of wonderful people around the table, and I am going to start with Josephine, who's back from Candy Labs, who's joining us once again. We have Pfeiffer, who is a producer for VR experiences. We have Kevin, who is 360 filmmaker. We have Micah back again, who does so many different things I can't even put a hat on it. We have the lovely Jordan from Unity. We have Alan Stott back from Beans Entertainment, and we have Andrew also back from Candy Labs. So welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. So, for the benefit of our lovely listeners, why don't we explain a little bit more about who you are and what you do? And I'm going to start randomly with you, Kevin.
So I'm a daily 360 filmmaker. You can see over 450 different videos on YouTube. And so basically you can find a lot of my 360 VR videos on YouTube. We post a new video every day, sort of about what's changing in the field and just whatever I find interesting with the medium. So you can find me online at Kevin Kunz, Kunz as in zebra E.com, or on Twitter at Kunz Films.
Wonderful, thank you, Kevin.
Hopefully that wasn't too long.
Pfeiffer, why don't you tell us more about what you do from a VR perspective?
Oh, and I also want to congratulate Pfeiffer on getting in Tribeca, and I'm giving her some Sour Patch. You can hear them in the podcast there. You got two bags of Sour Patch.
Yeah,
there.
that's awesome.
Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it. I am a VR producer. I focus on tools across the medium, whether that's volumetric video, photogrammetry, 360 video, to really suit whatever the goals of the experience are to transform the viewer through the experience.
Thank you. Mike, why don't you tell us more about the many different hats you wear?
Sure. Well, at heart, I'm a journalist and a researcher. I love to study neuroscience. I organize Neurotech SF, which is part of a global organization of Neurotech X. And my goal in leading these small events, and also SFVR events, San Francisco Virtual Reality events, is to bring together local hackers in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley to combine brain-computer interfaces with virtual reality, with artificial intelligence, to create next-generation brain-computer interfaces. And I really believe that there's a lot of VR headsets that are already incorporating biofeedback sensors like EEG and eye tracking. And so this is the direction the industry is going anyways, but I'm cultivating that community. I'm also representing Microdose VR. We're already working with the Muse faceplate. I don't want to oversell that or anything, but our interest is to combine. We're already combining your heart rate and your brain waves and putting those into visuals in VR. So if you're in VR and you can see reflections of your, gosh, that's awful. You can see reflections
of your concentration right
You
now.
can see reflections of your heart rate and your brain waves in virtual reality. It's going to deepen the sense of immersion. And with artificial intelligence, we can predict your emotion and your intention at the user interface level, which will create an interface that responds to you, that responds to what you like, that you enjoy a lot more because the computer is smarter in interpreting the human being. And then the next level beyond that is full dive immersion, when you're able to plug in the computer into your brain as if your brain was a hard drive, and you can go into, like the Matrix or Sword Art Online, you can go into a VR world. And so a lot of my research involves looking into that direction as well. So I study neuroscience and computational neuroscience and machine learning with that goal in mind of creative. I believe that that's my purpose in life, is to create nerve gear or neural lace. And so I have a podcast on that as well that people can listen to if they're excited about the fusion of neuroscience and virtual reality and technology and science.
Wonderful, thank you. Why don't you...
All right, well, those are big shoes to fill. That's hard to follow. Hi, my name is Jordan. Work at Unity. I've been at Unity for about 3 years. For about 2.5 years, I kind of did the dev content partner management side, which meant I dealt hands-on with creators and studios and businesses that were building really, really cool things in Unity. And we just did everything from figuring out ways to work together to either better the product, to apply hands-on help, both on technical and kind of consulting and business side, as well as just kind of deal with the frantic nature of working in a large development community and figuring out new ways to engage there. But yeah, I think hands-on specific to next realities and all that. I've had a pretty good in, which has been great with companies like The Void and Bailbob, and just working hands-on with those teams too, just to make sure that we understand their problems. And it's been really, really amazing, especially on the Unity side. I strongly encourage everybody out there who's listening, as well as the folks at this table, to hop on places like Unity Connect, our forums, Ask, and really get involved there, because I think the conversation we're going to have today is there are a lot of answers that maybe we won't cover that may exist out there too, so I'll keep it short.
Even shorter. Alan, I'm in marketing. Actually, my name's Alan. I work for Beans Entertainment. I am a marketer extraordinaire, as I've been described. Growth marketer. I like working with startup companies and any company that needs to have quick users, build users fast. I think that's really about it. I mean, I'm kind of a generalist at everything. Jack of all trades, master of none.
Wonderful.
Master of a couple.
Andrew, tell us more about what you're up to.
Of course. Hi, my name is Andrew Couch. I'm the founder and CIO of Candy Lab. We started this company 8 years ago, 2010. After coming out of the military, I was an infantryman. I worked with computer vision equipment with a product called FPCV2, Blue Force Tracker. It was a computer vision piece of equipment that worked by GPS and beacons. We call them ground sensors. Fast forward to after I saw the iPhone come out, I saw enough sensors in there to where I knew I could build a location-based AR engine, what's called a 9-axis sensor fusion engine, which we started back in 2010. And I got it built, believe it or not, with OpenGL, not iframe, around 2011, the end of 2011. We finally got it working because the processors just weren't right yet on the devices, but we got close. And we went live, in El Paso in 2012. It's the first use case of location-based augmented reality in America, actually. In fact, our patent goes to about a year before that. And our competitor comes online, Niantic. They get backing by Pokemon Go, right? Don Dodge, or I don't know if it was Don on the team, but at the time, why would you come to a small startup when you can go to like big, Niantic-backed Google, right, to do this type of a campaign? But it brought all this interest towards this AR engine that we've made. This AR engine right here, the one that has cards over that way, well, mostly over this way.
And our lovely listeners can't quite see
yeah,
that.
but anyways, we can pass this. I'm passing our location-based AR engine around the table so people can see our crown handling and sensor smoothing. It's a very solid and stable engine. It's cross-platform, works on an iPhone and an Android phone, going all the way back to 2011. It's a plugin you can get in Unity. They're viewing it in the asset store right now. So I don't know if we can call them and bug them, but as soon as that clears the asset store, developers can pull it down from there. And I believe the engine is free. And if you want to prototype for that, there's no cost. When you want to hook on the real-time delivery APIs and backend system, you finalize that registration over on our site, and then you can publish to the App Store games just like Pokemon Go or just like Unitaria, the app that we did for Univision after South by Southwest last year.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andrew. Right, Josephine, why don't you tell us more about what you do outside of Candy Labs?
Sure. I am also the president of the VR AR Association in Los Angeles. And the goal for our team there is really to bring that community together, really to make sure that there's a stronghold in LA, because I think most people are aware that a lot of the creativity kind of stems in LA because we have Hollywood, right? We have the entertainment industry there. But not only do we have that, we have the enterprise companies there as well. You have companies like Technicolor who are getting involved in AR and VR. And so really kind of like our goal is making sure that, the startups get to meet with the investors that they need to talk to, the right people, and the right connections are being made.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Of course.
So, we have this wonderful array of brain power around the table. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say this, which is one of the things that I say a lot at conferences, which is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And there are a lot of people right now who are getting into VR or immersive technologies, and it's not necessarily the right thing for them. They're doing it because they're jumping on a bandwagon and because they think it's the cool, hot technology thing that they should be involved in. And I know that we've discussed this individually many times before, but I'm going to throw this out as a conversation starter, which is that right now, who is actually asking what the moral and ethical implication is for these immersive technologies? Not just for the general kind of, whether somebody is doing good or doing bad with whatever that application or that technology is, but also how is this going to impact culture and society going forwards? Because there are not enough people who are thinking about actually what is the long-term impact of what we do. Now, Mike, I know we've had this conversation before, and I'm kind of going to throw this back out there again, which is this idea that there are a lot of game companies right now who are getting into VR and they're making these really violent, whether it's shooting or horror, whatever the thing is, and they're making these really violent experiences. And what they're not really thinking about is actually what is the long-term impact for putting somebody into a VR horror experience or a VR, violent experience, and how does that traumatically affect a person after they've had that experience? And there's nobody who's really asking those kind of questions about how do we safeguard the user? How do we safeguard the general public who do not understand what it is they're necessarily putting on their noggin before they put a HMD on their head? And who is making sure that developers are thinking about, or at least asking these questions before they leap into it? So, Michael, I'm going to push this to you as an initial opener.
Sure. Well, sort of on that, really close to that topic is so last year at GTC 2017, the GPU Technology Conference, I met this AI company, and I apologize, I'm not remembering their name at this point, but what they did was a technology called homomorphic encryption. And this is a technology that allows you to, let's say if you have an Amazon Echo, right now the Amazon will take your personal device, your voice, basically your voice, it will send it up into Amazon's cloud. It's end-to-end encryption, but when it gets to Amazon, Amazon has to decrypt your personal information to process something. So with homomorphic encryption, what you get is the ability to, for a cloud provider like Amazon, to run computations on what you send them without decrypting that data. And this is sort of important for the future of privacy, because what I'm seeing in the Neurotech SF group that I organize are companies and individuals showcasing technologies where, for instance, they're combining EEG with eye tracking, and the amount of data that you can get from an individual with those two things is really profound. You can find out, it's like a lie detector, but on the next level. So the lie detector technology is just like a galvanic skin sensor response. It's really bad technology. But when you combine EEG with eye tracking, you can become so precise in understanding exactly what's going on in someone's mind when they, so they had people pretending to be, they played this game where either you pretend that you're going to the mall to shop, or you're pretending to be to do some sort of terrorist activity. This was a game that they went, and they wanted to predict with the eye tracking and the EEG if they could know which one was which. So they had 5 people who were one and 5 people were the other, and they asked everyone to lie or to say, but the machine was able to figure out exactly which 5 people were there to pretend blow up the mall. And so this can really it has a lot of new capability to, these biosensors can really figure out what's going on in your mind with a lot of precision. So it's really kind of frightening to think that what companies can figure out about you in terms of, especially marketing companies. So you want to be able to protect your privacy, and you want to be able to protect your privacy in a way. And so we need technologies like homomorphic encryption and category theory encryption that can allow companies to provide services to you without gaining access to your data at the computational, at the point where they, so that way, bad actors or bad government actors cannot exploit your personal data. Like right now in the news.
What's happening right now with Cambridge Analytica.
And Facebook.
That's exactly what you just,
where Cambridge Analytica took Facebook's data against Facebook's policy, and it was used in the political campaigns in the US in 2016.
But this is a prime example of what we're talking about, which is this idea of people jumping into the space, creating, whether it's an application or experience, whatever the technology is, and not understanding the full implication of how people are going to utilize the data that they're putting into the world, because they don't understand enough about what they're actually creating.
And just to kind of add to that as well, I think it's also kind of a canary in the coal mine for the general public to understand that these large tech companies, Facebook, Apple, probably less likely, but Amazons of the world, they don't actually have the teams that can mobilize, protect, understand the scope of what they're creating, what they're implementing. And I think, frankly, the deadlines that they're probably setting for themselves internally, both on a team level, a management level, and then maybe even a board level, just to hit those data points so that their investor value can go up, that's working under the knife. And they don't have the time and the flexibility. I think that's pretty much what happened with Facebook. Could be wrong.
And I just want to point out that I don't think that people, when they're developing the technology, I don't think that they think forward enough as to what this can become. One of the things with Facebook is that they didn't think of people collecting data. They didn't think of what they were going to be able to do with all that data and how they were going to be able to build these predictors. But once that became the truth, then these other companies come in and they steal that data. Now imagine for a second you were talking about Amazon, and the Echo is one of those things that I always think about, because that's always listening to you. Always. I don't think a lot of people understand. It's 100% of the time listening to you, unless you hit that little red button, right? So imagine if there was ever a data breach at Amazon. Imagine the personal information, people on the phone, people talking, people doing whatever. And that's the kind of thing that people don't think forward ahead enough to say, well, this might come out of this. So let's make sure we have those protections ahead of time.
I was just gonna say, in terms of the privacy side, having filmed like a lot of protests in Berkeley, like, and someone who does live streaming in 360, I was quite unaware of like the doxing factor, which is where people can then target you online and say, oh, this is so and so person, they're at this protest, they're a liberal. So we started.
Let's just define for the listener exactly what doxing is, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand
So-
the
so-
damaging impact of doxing in as much as.
So people can basically like dig up info and say, oh, Kevin's at this protest right now. This means he's probably not at home. Maybe we can like send SWAT teams to his home or something. So
Well,
like,
it's a little bit more complex than
Yeah,
that
do
in
you-
terms of with doxing. What we're talking about here is researching enough information about a person and putting it out into the world with the specific intent of pointing people to it so that they can do something damaging to that individual,
Yeah.
be that bank records, personal information, school records of where the children go to school, whatever that thing is, deliberately and with intent putting personal information about somebody you do not know into the public domain so that something negative can happen to that person.
Yeah.
So it is quite a dangerous thing.
totally, and it can be something that can be done in a way accidental. Like, for instance, if I'm live streaming a thing and people are having an engagement, and somebody says, "Well, I live in Berkeley. I live at this," you know, and then all of a sudden they said it to thousands of people online. So I think there is the fear with big technology companies like Amazon giving out your data, but I'm more afraid personally of being like in a scenario where somebody catches me saying something like my email, which, by the way, if anyone does want to get in touch with me via email, it's
No, don't do it.
they warned me before this. No, it's pretty easy to find. Yeah, exactly. And then
What's your take on this?
Sure. So I'd like to make a suggestion for one solution to the less of the doxing problem, but more about this massive centralized data collection issue that we have. My feeling is that even with the best intentioned company, these large data collection companies cannot be really trusted with all your personal information. I do see one solution with data ownership, so personalized data ownership, which could be built off of maybe a Hashgraph style blockchain. So Hashgraph is a technology that was built a little bit after blockchain technology, and it could allow you to build a dApp on top of it that allows you to own your personal information.
I can sell how many steps I took today to
Absolutely.
Fitbit or whoever.
So yes, so that is actually the A solution is I own my personal information. I only give you a key to, and you only receive, so let's say a lot of times people ask for your social security number if you're doing contract work for them. So instead of sending them my social security number, which I was told never do this online, and now I end up having to do it all the time. Instead,
What's your social security, by the way?
Thanks, Kevin. Instead, I would send them a key, a la your Bitcoin wallet, right? This key that would change all the time, and they could plug in the key, and they would be able to send that info to the IRS without ever seeing my social security number. I could change that key. I mean, the key would automatically change, but I could basically restrict your access and have real ownership of my data.
So what's option 2?
So I'm saying that this is the ownership and the privacy is one of the outcomes of a solution like this. I haven't thought of another option yet, but I do think that another outcome of that solution would be, as we live in a more and more virtual world with more and more value being put on virtual items like data, and we are approaching a time in history where alternative income methods must be investigated. This also might be some solution to having, selling your data or not just like giving it away for free. Might be a way to augment it might be a way to augment your income or even just have an income, because in the current system, I'm not seeing universal basic income being just like right around the corner.
Okay, so there's some interesting points here that you raised, and one of the things that I know that we've spoken about before a couple of times here is in and around this idea of privacy, because a couple of people now have mentioned privacy. So I'm going to kind of throw this out on the table as well, which is, I'm not going to name names, but there is somebody who's been on the show before who has thrown out the hypothesis that privacy is a fallacy to start off with. It's not something that we have at the moment, but also that the attitude towards privacy will change within the next 5 to 10 years. where we're looking at a current digital generation who no longer believe in the ideas of privacy in the same way that we do, where we hold this information to be deeply personal, and there is this tension and anxiety around the release of personal data. And instead, that in the future, personal data will be the thing that people will understand the value of that personal data, and therefore it becomes an economy. It becomes something that you will sell your identity, you will sell that personal data in order to either A, gain income, or B, to make a trade and exchange with whichever company in a way that gives you a digital identity and a digital currency based on the back of privacy. Jordan, you have something to say.
So this may not, lead in directly. I mean, to Pfeiffer's point, I do think it's actually a very applicable method that you just kind of touched on. But I think this conversation started talking about, hey, how does this affect the culture? Whether it's privacy, whether it's XR development, VR, AR, whatever it might be. Privacy is a good example of this. I think as we swim farther upstream, hardware gets more powerful, the experiences get more intense, blockchains get more difficult to actually fish through and understand what's going on, whatever it might be there.
Eventually, you're uploading yourself to the cloud.
You're always going to come into this struggle where you're going to kind of get into this paradigm where you have people who understand the moral grounds of whether it works and whether or not it's something that we should be partaking in versus people who want to invest and cash out. And I think that can be applicable specific to what you just brought up with Hashgraph. Yeah, that's a great idea for the end user, people who actually create the technology. That's something that's completely scalable where theoretically we could be paying way more than we're actually receiving to sell our own data. And then maybe the data, similar to what happened with Facebook, how we thought it was somewhat of a relationship with Facebook and Facebook only with the data we were providing. That wasn't the case whatsoever. That's another feasible outcome because,
I think it's going to sort of follow the same trend as our media. Right now, a lot of us will post our media onto YouTube and monetize it with ads, but far more of us post onto Facebook and Instagram and give Zuckerberg your content for free. Facebook does pay 100 media companies to create content for them, and they're the top big ones like CNN, Times, but they're not paying you as individuals. So I think the same thing will be true of data, where a lot of people are going to give it away for free, but if people do find a way to monetize it, the smart people will levitate in that direction.
Josephine, I'm kind of curious to hear from your perspective about this when it comes to this future of privacy and future of digital identity. What your take is on this in terms of, when we talk about the impact from a cultural perspective of immersive technologies, what do you think is going to be that kind of major turning point when it comes to those attitudes around privacy, those attitudes around, what is the technology actually facilitating?
I think honestly, like in the future, right now people are so open to letting go of their identity and to letting go of the content that they create of themselves. They want everybody to have access to this. So I think the discussion that we've had where, privacy is a fantasy is somewhat true in the terms of the generation ahead of us might want to monetize it, but they also might not. They're also so loose and so free where they're just like, you know what, I want people to know who I am. This is who I am. They can do whatever. I think where we're going to see advocacy come in is in protecting the identities of those who really don't care that it's out there. And I don't think it's going to be up to the innovators like ourselves sitting in this room to think about it responsibly. And I know that's weird to say because we are actively trying to build technology that does good. And when the end user knows that that is our end goal, they're going to be open to letting that happen. So advocacy comes in when the realization is there is a company out there, there's a person out there who's not using my content, who's not using my identity for good. But a lot of people, when I think about the millennials, when I think about Generation Z, they're all about their safe space, they're all about doing good in the world. And I think brands are now tying their brand identity to that, where if they know that they're because I'm thinking as a marketer, right? So if they know that they're using someone's identity, someone's data, they're going to do it for good. And in that way, it impacts their brand equity, right? So that's how I think about it. I think the younger generation are not going to have a strong hold on how it's being used because for them, there's always going to be a benefit because of the technology that's coming out right now. Like if you think about social mobile mining and how, companies like Target and Walmart are going to reward users for giving them more data with Bitcoin. These are technologies that they want to be engaged in. So they're going to give us full access to it.
Okay.
And that's another way it can be monetized, kind of what Pfeiffer was talking about.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious to hear from you, Andrew, in as much as I hear what Josephine is saying. And I think that there is a certain degree of, you're right, as the people who are innovators, the people at the front of the field, we shouldn't worry too much about what we're doing necessarily, in as much as people will follow. But at the same time, I do think that there is a certain degree of danger when it comes to people who are making key decisions that the general public is not going to touch them maybe for 5 years or even 10 years down the line, at which point they don't get a say anymore in what the basic standard is, what is the norm, what is the degree of data or technology that has to be involved in their lives, because they aren't, they're not in the bubble that we're in, which is that we're kind of, in the front line of those trenches. And so, Andrew, I'm kind of curious from your perspective, whether or not you see any kind of risks inherent with the idea that we as the innovators shouldn't worry about these things, or do you think that there is perhaps a burden of responsibility to maybe think about these things and think about what is the longer term impact that we have on society and culture, given that they are following maybe 5 or 10 years in our wake?
Two things that I'd like to say to that. So the first thing, after what Pfeiffer was saying, congrats to your business model. I think it's really cool. Something that just crossed my mind is, say, and if not someone else, Pfeiffer, I envision, this public ID that somehow is getting assigned from one ad exchange location. Somehow using existing data points, they map out most of us. They at least get most of us in there, right? And we don't know it, but there is at least an ID set out there. And this middle market company, I see them doing these deals with ad buying companies saying, hey, we have this many people now on a public ID, and we're running a blockchain on this. And here's why you're going to start paying us ads, and instead of running over to AdWords or somewhere else. Our users are being notified right now that these public IDs are able to be sold to brands, and we do ad revenue sharing with these people, and they opt in and opt out, in and out as much as they want. When they turn it on, their mobile phones, because they've opted into it, and this plugin I see going to like a Pfeiffer says, hey, I'm this user. Pfeiffer already has a public ID for me, and any ad that I now see through my applications, if powered by them, is going to be things that I want to see. I see machine learning coming into that, so it's more relevant to the things I want to see. And because it's my public ID attached to the UDID on this device, I see myself having this wall, like this Pfeiffer wall maybe between me and the outside world, and then I get to choose when I make money like Uber, and I turn it on, and when I turn it off, I know that I know that I'm going to be going back to 2017, and I'm going to be seeing pop-up ads like on my phone, right? But in the ones that I may not want to see. So I see empowerment right there. If you could figure that out, I see, and you have to already set it where it's kind of like a Yelp, where it's like, hey, look, we already had your location here. You're just password protecting it. And I see all of us coming into droves to you, and I see us saying, okay, I want to be a part of this new network standard, and then you convince the industry to pay you guys, and now we have opt-in, opt-out whenever we feel like it to see these messages or not, and it's backed on this public ID, not my personal information. So even if your servers get hacked, right? Say you're not a decentralized system, you're on a centralized system, you get hacked, data gets stolen. If you can guarantee some anonymity that the public IDs aren't going to be matched up with photo IDs, say, because you stored them in different tables, you're on PCI compliant servers, who cares if it gets stolen, right? You can do backups, fork it, issue out new IDs based off pre-recorded data, and you change the key like you were, exactly like I was trying to say, but it seems like you've already figured out to just change the key readily. But even still, you have an anchor point somewhere. I won't get into the specifics on that, but you figure that out, you could take down AdWords for sure. And it's because all of us want to see it happen. And I feel like you get this ID set, you tell us we have this ID, the industry buys from you as an ad exchange, you do API updates to all these other companies off this new protocol you created, and I see you guys really spearheading this for the rest of us on the ad side. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, shoot, I'm currently producing VR content, but I'll have to start that immediately.
Yeah. Mobile marketing for a while.
So I wanted to mention a couple of news items that are really relevant to this topic. One of them is, so recently a lot of Googlers were upset, this was in the news, when they found out that their company, Google, that some people at their company were supplying the US government with deep learning applications for finding persons of interest in war zones like Afghanistan and Iraq. We've seen, cameras have been mounted all around London for a long time, all around China for a long time, all around New York for a long time. But recently we're seeing that China is using artificial intelligence to identify criminals, but they're also talking about a social credit system where
It's very Black Mirror.
yeah, like a Black Mirror episode, which is a science fiction horror show, but brought into the real world.
But here's the thing. You're talking about the Chinese application of social currency
Yep.
and how this impacts their behaviors. The funny thing is this isn't new. China's been doing this for several years now in terms of actually limiting people's transportation ability, stopping them from being able to get on trains and planes and actually travel around the country based on their social credit rating as a result of their integration with society, how they integrate with society, what they're doing, how they're behaving and performing and interacting with others. So this isn't new. This is stuff that's already been going on. Right. It's just becoming more prevalent now in terms of people becoming aware of the situation.
So we see social graph as something that people on an individual level and a very small community level, like hash graph and the social graph and the blockchain. And so people are doing things on that scale. But then we see big countries like Russia who are taking the blockchain idea and saying, let's make this a countrywide system. And so what I'm wondering is if our future is that companies are looking at what China's doing, and that we're going to see that sort of like all the cameras in London, New York, and everywhere where you see cameras everywhere, they're going to have AI to detect fugitives. They're going to have maybe the beginning of a social graph where, like China has. I'm guessing.
No, but what happens when you have a government or an organization who runs the country who fundamentally wants to redefine what's socially acceptable for somebody? So it's one thing to say you're looking for fugitives. It's another thing to say, do you know what, if you happen to disagree with somebody or you've made a statement that is, perhaps a little bit too bold or whatever the thing is, that suddenly this restricts your ability to interact. It restricts your ability to do banking. It restricts your ability to just be able to interact with society as a whole. Who is going to safeguard and make sure that actually, when we talk about, utilizing these types of social graphs, social currency, etc., who's safeguarding anybody from the kind of impact of a negative governmental environment? It's an open question. I don't think there's necessarily an answer for it.
Well, I'm guessing the guy who just got an unlimited presidential term in China, right? So no. But to speak more on that, you look at Fahrenheit 451, which HBO is putting out right now with Michael B. Jordan. They're actually using 360 video in that, and I think that really speaks to the times where we are living in a surveillance state, and ultimately they control information, and if you can control the information you're getting, you're controlling how minds are putting together associations. And we're pretty much in that age right now where books are being banned, but it's not books, it's the internet, and that's very scary.
But we're talking about the idea of banning books or, limiting cultural and social behaviors. But what we're talking about is behaviors that are already in place and have been for an awfully long time. And when we talk about the application of technology into this kind of arena, we're talking about behavioral engineering and cultural engineering that is not actually new in any way, shape, or form. But what I am curious to understand from everybody around this table is to just kind of figure out, what is that one thing, be it a cultural thing or a technological thing, that needs to change in order to see a significant move forward, whether that is something that is going to acknowledge the responsibility for moral and ethical guidance when it comes to these things, whether it is the impact of where these technologies are going to go. What is that big significant thing that you think could completely change the landscape? And I'm going to start with Kevin.
I think making YouTube available to everyone in China would be a huge step forward, and I don't see why that's not possible right now. And especially as someone who posts all the time on YouTube, I think it's horrible that Chinese people don't get to see my horrible jokes and all this silly stuff that I post online.
They're never going to hear that.
But in all seriousness, they can with Veer, which is another platform that lets people upload 360 video content. So I think regardless, no matter how many walls the Chinese will put up for media, it's going to get through the cracks anyway. So they're kind of like fighting a losing battle. So I think that would be huge. And I'm not saying this because I applied for a job at Google. I'm just saying it because I really would love to see YouTube available there. And I think it would raise the bar for education, a lot of other things, society-wise.
Piper, what's your thoughts on this?
I just want to rephrase the question so I'm sure of what you're asking. You're asking for one cultural or technological change that would bring about the most impact toward a fair and equal world? That's a very difficult question.
Sour Patch for all.
I do see, for me, the largest obstacle that we're facing to a fair and equal world is the out of control capitalism and oligarchy that we're seeing. And I have no problem with free market capitalism as a theory, but the way that it's practiced is no longer in a free market. I think that these controls over your identity will be huge. I think that will stop governments from creating, fake profiles for people as well, if done correctly, obviously. I think that all technologies have a potential for grave misuse, including virtual reality, and I worry about that on a daily basis. And I think that the best solution for that is a real education system. And as oligarchy becomes more and more powerful, education will be less and less valued. I'm sorry that I don't have a better answer than that. But
No, that's awesome. Alan, I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I'm actually going to bring down burst everybody's bubble. I have a very cynical view of this, and I haven't always had a cynical view. But now, like speaking with people at this conference, speaking with like the people who are working on the technology of the future, and speaking with the people in marketing who seem to think that everything that we're doing is for good, but it's being used by bad actors to do bad things. Correct. So what's going to happen in the future is I think right now the benefit to people. So the benefit outweighs the privacy concerns. That's why it's a problem, because nobody cares about Google tracking your every step. Nobody cares about Alexa listening to every single word you say. Like nobody cares about that because the benefit outweighs the risks. What's going to happen for the culture to shift is for the risks to outweigh the benefits. Once you get into a Black Mirror state, like something where something is just so crazy that somebody steps in and says, "Wait a second, we can't do this anymore. Look at what look at what we're doing." And I think honestly, I think that's what needs to happen. So.
Okay, awesome.
Hooray!
Micah, tell us your thoughts on this one.
Okay. Oh, okay, yeah. So I wanted to do a quote because, so one of the things that I do as a researcher is I'm researching the brain so that I can build artificial brains and artificial cortex and of course neural lace or nerve gear. But artificial brains. So I really believe there's a scientist. His name is Demis Habisis, and he runs this company called I believe he runs Google Brain. He works at Google and he works on creating an artificial mind that can play video games, and we're at GDC, so it's an apt topic. But he says that if you solve intelligence, you solve everything else, and I fundamentally believe that if we can create a sentient artificial mind that it's super intelligence and artificial general intelligence, a technological singularity, then that sort of like massive thinking power will help us solve the biggest challenges in the world. And so that's one of my goals, is to that's what I think will be the one thing that will change everything.
Awesome.
the
Okay.
robot overlord will save us.
So mine's pretty simple. More internet for less energy, and more access for everyone around the world, with them getting the education and knowledge and the ability to make it as permission-based use as they feel comfortable with, or that they don't feel comfortable with. Less electricity, more use. I think that's the meat and potatoes of it right there.
Okay, and Jordan, why don't we hear what your thoughts are on this?
Yeah, I should preface I was born and raised in San Francisco, and I've been across the country a couple times, so I can't really speak for all cultures or this kind of unified solution. But here's what I can say, especially for a country that has so much innovation and so much money behind that innovation. We not only need more education, but we need technical schools specifically. It's not education. Education's not the problem, because public schools exist. Obviously, there are public schools that struggle, but at the end of the day, they do exist. And most Americans do go to some sort of school at this point, whether or not they do well.
What they're teaching doesn't.
I also subscribe to kind of a dystopic. Yeah, I subscribe to a kind of a dystopic outlook at the moment, which if we all saw Elysium with Matt Damon, mediocre movie, but I do see the adoption curve of the technology that we spoke about today, whether it's crypto, whether it's XR. I do seeing it being both both too complex of a kind of adoption that's supposed to happen quickly on the pushing hardware on people's side, as well as simply not accessible. The iPhone 10, for example, it was like $1,200. It's got pretty much all the next-gen tech that we all use and all optimized for in our creation. I'm going to go ahead and say that all the iPhones next year are probably going to be $1,200, and then whatever comes after that is going to be $1,600. And middle America, the Rust Belt, the Bible Belt, your average blue-collar worker, we're going to start pricing them out. Automation, I feel the same way about. Uber today, unfortunately, had that tragic event with the self-driving car. I think the worst thing in the world is to put blue-collar out of work for AI, automation, machine learning, whatever the hell it might be. And if we are going to do that, then we need to provide technical education on the back end as support, where we can reteach skill sets. We can have folks who have never even heard of something as simple as Bitcoin, I shouldn't say simple, but something like Bitcoin, to really understand and adopt and manifest new ideas and new applications. I think as a country, we are not doing that whatsoever. Technical schools are looked down upon, which is a travesty.
Yeah.
We're running out of plumbers, even at that level. I mean, that is a true thing. So that would be, I think, the Band-Aid solution at the moment for the West. So,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Okay. Josephine, why don't you give us your thoughts on what you think the one biggest change is going to be?
So I hate myself for saying this, but I think it has to be a global governing body, almost kind of like the UN, because we talk about education, but we talk about it from, public schools and things like that. But I think about even like the legal teams that we work with that don't even understand the technology that we're creating, the politicians that we're working with that they have no clue. And so I think there has to be some education on that level because unfortunately they tend to make a lot of the decisions and they need to come together globally as a governing body making decisions globally, because when you think about countries like Africa and India where we do have the talent there but they don't have the resources, imagine giving them all the access, kind of like what you were talking about. I think that has to be something that does change. It's awful to say because I don't want one huge body making decisions for everybody, but I think we have to kind of start there, and it has to be global, and it has to be in the interest of everyone.
Something like UN.
Yeah,
Right? Something
yeah,
that,
exactly.
is represented by everybody.
Yeah,
for everybody, not
exactly.
Okay.
I really do think something
Okay.
like that.
All right then.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. So I want to thank you all for joining me today. As always, we like to give our listeners a way to find out a little bit more about you. We ask you to do that by sharing with us your social media handle of choice. What would that be, Andrew?
Candy Lab tweets for candylab.com. They are a location-based augmented reality company.
Wonderful, thank you. And Alan?
I've recently changed it, so now it is at one badass marketer on everything.
Wonderful, thank you, Alan. And Jordan?
Yeah, I guess Twitter is probably the best way. It's at Taddy Jordan. That's TADDYJORDAN. I got to warn you, though, I hate Donald Trump, so just expect to hear a lot of it, okay?
Can I share a few websites?
By all means.
Okay, so if Silicon Valley Global News is at svgn.io. Microdose VR is microdosevr.com. VRMA.io, you can find the Nerve Gear show or the Neurolace podcast. DeathStarRobot.com, you can find a link to a group where we're researching how to build next generation artificial intelligence. Neurohackster.com, if you want to help us build new brain computer interfaces, that's neurohaxor.com. If you want to join one of our other Facebook groups, vrma.work. I have over 30 science and technology Facebook groups with over 200,000 people, and we're on Twitter I'm on Twitter at WorkSalt, so you can connect there. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And Kevin, what about you?
I'm on YouTube at Kevin Coons, Kunz as in zebra E. And you can also find me on Twitter at Coons Films. And the first person to write a comment linking this podcast is going to get a special prize because I want to know as soon as it's posted, and then I can proliferate it out to the masses. So.
Awesomeness.
Yeah.
What about yourself?
So my social media handle is at virtually Pfeiffer. F as in flower, I as in indigo, F as in flower, E as in elephant, R as in rabbit.
Wonderful, thank you. And Josephine, what about your good self?
My website is arfuse.com for our Unity plugin, and you can find me on Twitter at Josephine Muniz, Munis. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And if you're still listening to this, congratulations. I commend you on being able to listen all the way through this during GDC in the most noisy room I've ever been in. Otherwise, as always, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd.
Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you, and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
DigitalJamSessions.com